I'm Liam Milan, and in this video, we're going to look at Ableton Live's operator device. So operator is a synthesizer, and it's one of the two main synthesizers we have on offer within the Ableton Live library. So we have analog, which is a subtractive based synthesizer and is a very classic vintage style synthesizer, and then operator, which produces three different types of synthesis. So first I'll load in operator on an empty track, and we can have a look at the different areas. So subtractive synthesis is when you will start with some raw waveforms. So it can be a sine wave, it can be a square, a triangle, or a sawtooth. And then you subtract from that using filtering and other modifiers of the sound. Now, in operator, we have subtractive, but we also have another type, which is additive, where we can go from a basic waveform and actually add in extra frequencies that we want on those particular oscillators. So we're adding in additional information rather than taking it away. Frequency modulation, which is the third type and the main kind of design aspect of operator, is frequency modulation, which is basically the principles that we change the pitch of the waveform at a very fast rate, so fast that it happens within how long it takes for the waveform to normally play one full cycle. And in turn, what that actually produces is additional frequencies, or what we refer to as side bands, frequencies which can be higher or even lower than the actual musical pitch we're playing. So let's have a look. So we have our four operators here. So it's a little bit confusing because the device is called operator and the parts within it are also called operators too. But operators is an FM synthesis way of calling them oscillators. The key thing is these oscillators can sometimes be heard. Sometimes they can be used to manipulate the properties of the other operators or waveforms in the actual equation, or they can be a little bit of both, and we hear and also have some modulation going on too. So in terms of what we call the algorithms in operator, we have some FM-based behaviors, and then we have some subtractive-based behaviors. So these colored blocks here, you'll notice, will represent the actual stacking order of these particular operators here. So this one here basically means that at the very bottom of the diagram, we will hear the final operator right at the bottom, so operator A. All the ones above it are actually there to manipulate the properties of that bottom oscillator. So for instance, if I go over to what we call a parallel stack, where there's two blocks side by side, two up and they're side by side, this one here means that the yellow, A, will be heard, and then the blue, or the purple, will be heard as well. So C and A will be heard, and above them lies B and D respectively, which can manipulate the properties of the next one below it. So the rest of the algorithm's a little bit beyond the scope of what we can cover in this tutorial, but the main principles is we're rewiring these operators to make them behave differently. That's what these algorithms are for. So the final one, you'll notice, has nothing stacked above any of the other operators or the blocks on the diagram, and that's because they're running just in parallel, and one can't modulate the properties of the other. They can't modify each other, and this is subtractive synthesis. So these waveforms that come from these operators will basically run side by side, so we can just blend them together. So if we're in our side-by-side mode here, we can go to the first operator, so operator A, and we can choose the type of waveform. So just like subtractive synthesis, we can choose something that is, in this case, a sawtooth. So if I just solo that out, we'll go for a fairly low note. Just turn that down because it is a loud waveform. We can modify a few things with this first operator that we're hearing here. So the first thing is the envelope. So the envelope changes how the amplitude of this operator plays from the start of the note, playing the note, how long it takes to go to full volume, how long it stays at full volume, and then how long it takes when you take your finger off the note to fade down to silence again. So at the moment, when that note ends, I've deliberately left a rest in between the loop. You'll hear there's a slight fade out. So we can change that using the envelope here for this particular operator by using the release control. Okay, so if we think about typical subtractive synthesis, it is about layering up different waveforms. So I will go to B, and let's choose a sawtooth for that as well. And this time we're going to use a detune control. Now, as I mentioned earlier, it's a hybrid synthesizer, but it uses the interface or the front end of an FM synthesizer. So in subtractive synthesis, we're used to each of these oscillators or waveforms being tunable. We can tune them up an octave or tune them up a different harmonic interval to get more interesting textures. In Operator, it's based around the FM synthesis principles, which is what we call ratios. So the note going in is the actual musical pitch. And at the moment, because this ratio is 1:1, it means that the note coming out will be the note that you're playing. If I set this one to be 2:1, it will actually play double the frequency of that note being played, which means it will be an octave above, and so on. We can tune these, but we have to think of them in a different way to conventional semitones and octaves. So I want to create a quick and easy Reese bass out of this, so two sawtooths that are detuned from each other, so they start having a different interaction phase-wise and create a sense of movement. So I'm going to slightly increase the fine control here, which is 1,000th of a whole step, so a whole semitone here, or a ratio movement. So let's do that and we'll listen to it. And let's just check the envelope here. The envelope of this second operator is not the same as the envelope of the first. So we're only hearing a very momentary version of that second operator there, operator B. So let's increase the sustain, and then it should be the same in duration as that original operator. Okay, so a simple Reese bass coming through it. Now we have a filtering stage which will apply to all the sounds within Operator. So it's not like a subtractive where we can choose to route things and patch them in different places. It's just going to take the whole mix of our synthesizer and pass it through a filter. But if you've used a normal subtractive synthesizer before, you'll know that the filter can be used to shape a sound, and also we can use an envelope on the filter to also make it move the filter over time too. So here's a principle I'm going to go for. I want it to be that the Reese is filtered at first, so it's not so bright, and then it opens up with the filter going to its highest value, and we hear all that higher frequency content. So in order to do that, I need to lower the actual filter's static position to begin with. Then I need to go to the envelope application to that filter position and increase that. And before hearing it, I also need to create that upwards envelope shape. So I need to take this and push it up, or increase the attack, sorry. So it will slowly bring the filter up as the note's played. So I'll stop modulating the filter with that envelope by setting it to 0. You'll barely hear that, but it's just a low rumble. And then as I increase the envelope, you'll hear the application of the envelope onto that filter. Okay, speaking of envelopes, let's have a look over on this shell here, which is the pitch envelope shell. So I'll turn on the pitch envelope, and at the moment it's defaulted that its peak, its highest position it will start at, is 12 semitones above the actual tuning of the synthesizer. So it will go from an octave above and sweep down. Now when we look at the LFO modulation and the pitch envelope modulation, we can choose where the destination is for these particular modulators. So at the moment, the pitch envelope is being assigned to all of the operators here, and I can increase that to maybe 24 semitones, and then the actual amount, as we had before with the amount here for the envelope, this is just a rotary dial instead. So I'm going to increase that to 100%, which means it actually will apply 2 semitones of pitch envelope modulation. And let's just slow that descent of the pitch envelope down. Okay, so I'm going to just raise the filter a little bit and make that less muted. So we're getting quite a nice shape to this now. And that's as far as I'm going to take the subtractive principles. So I've got the different operators which produce the waveforms running side by side, finally getting through that filter. We made the envelope move that filter around as well. So let's have a look at additive synthesis for a minute. So that's the other aspect of this. So this waveform here, let's just increase the amplitude of that so we can hear it. I'll just get rid of the pitch envelope, just turn it off. Okay, so additive synthesis, as I mentioned earlier, is about adding on frequencies to an initial waveform. So traditionally, you'd start with just a single sine wave, which is literally only the frequency of the musical note you're playing. So that sine wave at the moment is turned up to full. And then if I just press the editor here and set it to just 16 harmonics that we can have, we've got that initial musical pitch. And if you remember when I talked about ratios, I talked about multiples of. So 2 times the original pitch of a signal will be an octave above. When we double frequencies, we get to the next musical octave each time. So what I'm going to do here is just introduce some additional harmonics. And down in this oscillator display, you'll see the actual waveform we're hearing get reshaped visually so we know what we're doing to the waveform. So what can work quite nice here is to do the same thing with an additional operator. Remember, we're in this subtractive synthesis type of routing where things are all side by side, being mixed at the end. We turn this one up and we go for a different type of combination of harmonics. So let's just pull that up again. So the volume of this particular waveform I've made with additive synthesis is slowly coming in, and I'm actually going to introduce the volume of this second one immediately and drop it down. So the waveform coming from operator D is going to be up first, and then as it comes down, the waveform from operator C will take over. So we get a blend between 2 different timbres. So you can hear there's a percussive timbre, and then it slowly goes into the other timbre that I've created there. Okay, so that's covered the 2 of the 3 main synthesis types. Let's just start with a blank slate, just loading in a new operator. Let's have a quick look at the FM synthesis before we finish. So FM synthesis is literally the modification of the frequency of the sound that you're playing. So I have an operator here which I can actually listen to. So I've put it higher up into the register. I'll just do this on the transpose here, so it's up 2 octaves. So the algorithm, if you notice, is not the same as it was when we changed it to the parallel algorithm. This one is our full stacked algorithm. So we can hear that bottom operator A, and then the next operator above it, which is B, will modulate the pitch of the bottom operator. So we're not going to hear it in a vibrato sense. If we grab the LFO and turn that on, and we just have that set slowly, this is what I mean by vibrato. So like a singer, just a deviation of pitch in a rhythmical way. FM synthesis is doing that, but it's doing it so fast that it changes the actual nature of the waveform because it happens rapidly within the original waveform and we get new frequencies. So let's turn up this second operator, make sure it's fully playing amplitude-wise, so have the envelope fully open. And as it's playing that lower pitch, or the original pitch, which is operator A, let's turn up the modulating operator, which is B. And let's drop that down into some more sub-orientated frequencies. So we can hear that moving it sounds quite nice in this context. And again, that amplitude we have here of how much is actually being applied in terms of how this operator modifies the pitch of the one below and creates all those really rapid changes in the new timbre. We can use the envelope here to just reshape what that's doing over time, basically. So it's going to go from its current, or it's going to go from a lower position, go up, and then rapidly drop down again. So we introduce this next one. So this one's going to now modulate the timbre of this one, and then the timbre of this one is going to modulate the timbre of this one. But remember, we only hear the lowest one. So they're all affecting each other running down. Okay, so that's as much as we can cover with FM synthesis. The last thing to mention in terms of operator and the options it has is the filter section here has a slightly hidden distortion stage in it, which can be quite good for, one, getting a less dynamic sound. So if you want to make what was quite a varied sound in terms of frequency content and volume over time and make it more upfront and aggressive sounding, if you add distortion to it, you are limiting how much range it has between quietest and loudest, and you're making it so it's just more on and off. So if I introduce the soft shaper, we have the drive control here, and I can increase that, and you'll hear that the presence increases as well as additional frequencies. And alternatively to the shaper control here, if we go to the filters, we can choose these circuit modeled filters, which are based around classic iconic synthesizer circuitry. And those also have their own drive control, how distorted the filter stage can become. So a lot more subtler, and a lot that tends to bring out the bottom end a lot more as well. So good for beefing up your sounds as you go too. So that's our overview and introduction to Ableton Live's operator, where we've looked at the behavior, the synthesis types of the device itself, how certain aspects can affect the properties of others using the different algorithms, and also how we can use the filter stage to reshape and also distort our signal path.